Hi there, welcome to the video, welcome back for return viewers. I'm Kerry, you're watching the Christchurch review of books, and it's that time of the month again. Yes, it is a book haul time for the month of March. And first of all, let me just excuse any traffic noise you may be hearing. There are windows in front of me. I've closed them for now, but I'm in a fairly busy area. And also you may hear the sound of a washing machine, which is just out the door going, and so that may interfere with the audio. And I have had feedback on audio issues with my videos. The DJI mic seems to be clipping sound occasionally. I was tempted to use just the camera's internal microphone today, but I'll give the DJI mic another go before I start fiddling around with settings. I just couldn't be bothered doing that at the moment, so we'll just go with this. Okay, so the month of March was starting to look like another slim book haul month, and what I've come up with in the end is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books. Well, maybe 8 really, because one of them is a box set of several. We'll get onto that in a moment. And I'm just swinging around in a chair here for some reason. Anyway, first book. Now, a few weeks ago, I went over to the area of Edgware, a little bit north of here, mainly because I had a craving for fish and chips. You know, a well-known fast food in maybe many of the Commonwealth nations, comes from the UK. Part of our tradition, really, growing up, going to a suburban fish and chip shop, getting your greasies, as they were called. My favourite, 2 pieces of fish and a scoop of chips. Yeah, it's just part of New Zealand tradition to eat that type of thing. It's probably completely unhealthy for you. But anyway, almost a year ago now, I moved into an area near the central city, and there isn't really a fish and chip shop, a traditional fish and chip shop nearby. You could get it delivered and pay 2/3 more. Not really an option for me most of the time. So I had come across a very nice traditional fast food shop at the end of Colombo Street in Edgware called 1040 Takeaways. I believe it's 1040 Colombo Street. And, you know, it looks like one of those places that hasn't changed for decades, but I gave them a go and tried their fish and chips, and they were really nice. So I've gone back there a few times. It's a bus ride away from me, so it's not really a impulse thing, really. Well, maybe it could be. So I went out there with fish and chips on my mind, and it just happens to be just around the corner from a Reverie Books, one of the small but rather well-stocked used bookshops in Christchurch. So I, you know, went and had a look at the bookshop, and then bought my fish and chips and came home. And in the bookshop I found a number of interesting books, but this one caught my eye most prominently, maybe. What is the word I'm thinking of? It looked like a good idea to buy, and it is Tornado, In the Eye of the Storm by John Nichol. Now, there are a lot of these kind of memoir come aviation history books out there now, you know, probably because of all the conflicts in recent decades, and this one basically tells the history of the Tornado IDS, a multinational swing-wing attack aircraft from the 70s, and I think Germany, Italy, Germany, Italy, UK, and I'm thinking of some others which I've forgotten. We got together and to build this deadly aircraft, which was intended to basically strike against the Soviet hordes if they crossed into Western Europe in a kind of doomsday scenario, and it was supposed to fly at all weathers, low level. You know, that was its mission. Of course, it ended up being used in totally different types of conflict, and the main one mentioned in this book is the Gulf War, 1991, where it was used to attack airfields belonging to the Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq. And John Nichol was a navigator, the backseater in one of the Tornado missions, and his aircraft got shot down and he got taken captured. So he's got a unique insight into the aircraft and the operations in the war. Yeah, like I said, there are quite a lot of these sort of memoir come technical history books out there. I've got another one on the Typhoon, a slightly later aircraft. You can find a lot of them, but they're very interesting. And if you're a bit of a long-time aviation nerd like me, you'll lap this stuff up. And of course, the war stories are also another layer on top of that. So that is Tornado, Eye of the Storm by John Nichol. Next up, a book which I didn't even know existed until I saw it in a mailing list. I think it was the Recommendo mailing list mentioned this book. And so I went and ordered it, and I had it in my hands in less than a week via a certain large online book retailer, and that is Project Orion, 1957 to 1965. Now this is the expanded edition. I do have the original edition, or at least the UK version of the original edition that came out in the early 2000s. I remember reading it after one of my many health scares, and I didn't quite take it all in. It was a little much at the time, but it wasn't a subject that interested me. So Project Orion was a project from the late 50s, as the date suggests, into the 60s, which investigated the idea, the concept, and the mechanics of basically dropping nuclear bombs out the back of a spaceship to propel it to immense speeds to travel across the solar system and what have you. Seems a really bizarre idea now, but this is something that was seriously considered and studied, and they worked out a lot of the ideas behind it and necessary. And the original book apparently had to trim a lot of the data and references and what have you away. And the author, George Dyson, whose father worked on the project originally, Freeman Dyson, he's a rather famous scientist in the US, and his father was part of the project. And his son, back in the early 2000s, his son wrote probably the first full history of it. And now, come this year, he's put out an expanded version, which adds back in all the material he had to cut out for the original version. So I didn't know this book existed, like I said, and it is like catnip to me. I remember reading parts of the original one. A lot of it kind of went past me because of my health issues at the time. But yeah, this is fantastic stuff. And this one's got lots of pictures, diagrams, tables, what have you. I mean, I think their motto was something like Saturn by 1970 or something, such would be the advance of using this type of technology. But of course, it had its downsides. Getting it into orbit required multiple nuclear explosions. The only place they could think they could launch from was possibly Antarctica, and then treaties came about and stopped that from being a possibility. So it's one of those big dreams that people had, and people like to go back to it and think about what ifs, and of course the military got in on the act, and they had all sorts of ideas for massive Orion nuclear battleships that could go into orbit or hide deep in the solar system and carry nuclear weapons. So like the ballistic missile submarines we have today that hide in the ocean and could launch a strike at any time, they had the idea for the same thing. Deep space spaceship which could swing back to Earth and launch a barrage of missiles at a surprise. Of course, the Soviets weren't too thrilled about that idea, and they made plans to counter it with military versions of their Soyuz ships and so on. All this type of stuff, blue sky stuff, was going on in the Cold War era. So that is Project Orion, 57 to 65, the expanded edition by George Dyson. Okay, next up, I had a bit of a stressful time earlier this month, some health stuff. Do I ever stop talking about it? It came back, and I had to take basically a day to myself, and on that day I just basically went into the central city and browsed in a bookshop, the Scorpio Books, the large independent bookshop in Christchurch here, and it was just a really nice experience. I got so wrapped up buying books online and whatever that I seemed to really actually just go to a bookshop and without a target in mind, just to browse and find what might interest you. I mean, I just found it a really nice experience for a change after a while of not doing that type of thing. And the book that I found there doing that was this one, Psychonauts by Mike J. Now, Mike J is a well-known writer in the area of drugs and drug culture, whatever. Not really my thing usually, but this one stuck out to me because it's about the history of self experimentation with drugs and substances by scientists and in history, and it's very fascinating. I've read the first section. Does fixate a little too much on the one drug, cocaine, for the first 100 pages or so, but it uses this to loop back into history and give examples of how the self-experimentation was going on and the crazy ideas and results and the social change. A large part of the first section is about how cocaine was seen as a wonder drug to fix the modern affliction, or basically people getting burnt out by work and what have you. And they thought there was like a certain drug which could fix all that, and cocaine came along, and boy, did they think that was the wonder drug. Of course, it all went bad. People took it to excesses. Some of these scientists took it to excess, became shambling masses that needed to be weaned off it, or basically destroyed themselves. And they had this idea that cocaine could be the method of stopping people who were addicted to opiates. Of course, it ended up that the people were addicted to both substances in the end. And the first section ends where the tide has turned against cocaine as a popular fix-all, and it was starting to get banned by laws and what have you. And I think it ends in 1924. The first section anyway ends in 1924, when the Coca-Cola company took the actual Coca products out of their drinks. So that is Psychonauts, Drugs and the Making of the Modern Mind by Mike J. Quite interesting. I am, let me see, up to chapter 3, just past page 100, so I'm making progress on that one. Okay, next up, something a little different. I'll give a little background why I wanted this. So basically at my workplace there are a monthly, what they call wellness meetings, basically teams meeting where we get together and do an activity which is not directly connected to a job, just for a social type thing. And sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's very tedious. Anyway, I had an idea of doing like an interactive storytelling session. I don't know if I'll ever do this before I actually leave this job, because I'm not sure about my future there as usual. But I had an idea of using some old choose your own adventure type books as a basis for doing this. And choose your own adventure books came around in the late 70s, early 80s. There were a number of competitors, similar books like Pick a Path and all that stuff, and the choose your own adventures were massive in the United States. You could pick them out from a mile while. They had a distinctive red and white livery, and they were just really simple stories where you could choose page 6 or page 7 depending on your choice in the story, and they're all simple things like science fiction or monsters and all that type of thing. Like I said, they're massive in the United States. I don't know if they ever became quite as massive here, but I remember seeing them in every school library, every bookshop, when in the 80s when I was a young person. Strangely enough, I actually was young once. And so I thought I'd pick up one of these to have a look at, investigating it for this wellness meeting type thing, and I couldn't find any. They used to be ubiquitous in second-hand bookshops, but they seem to have all disappeared. A lot of the kids series before maybe the 1990s don't seem to be on the shelves. Maybe they don't sell, or some have been repackaged. Anyway, Bantam, I believe, was the publisher of the Choose Your Own Adventures, and they let the trademark lapse in the 90s, and another company has taking up the rights of the Choose Your Own Adventure books, and that is Choose Co. Sounds like a very singular minded company. They want these books, and over the past few years they've been republishing some of the very early Choose Your Own Adventure books, and you can get them in these box sets. Now this is Origin 4, which is a reprint of I think the very first 4 Choose Your Own Adventure books, all by the same author, whose name eludes me right now. It is R.A. Montgomery. Now there are some other authors of the Choose Your Own Adventure books which have retained the rights to their books, so those ones aren't getting republished, but I do recognise Montgomery's name. And in this box set there are 4 Choose Your Own Adventures from the very early version. Now, the first one is the Abominable Snowman. You can guess what that one's about. Second one, Journey Under the Sea, again self-evident. And we have Space and Beyond, the old science fiction type one. And then the Lost Jewels of Nabuti. I guess that's like a junior Indiana Jones type thing. And then, like I said, they're all very simple, and these early ones are kind of heavily illustrated as well. You read a passage, then you get a choice at the bottom, and if you make one choice, you go to a certain page and you find out what happens, and if you make another choice, you can go to another page, and so on. I guess you get the idea. A lot of people my generation will be very familiar with this type of thing. I think in the Commonwealth countries, and especially in New Zealand, the UK equivalent were much more popular, and the UK went down a slightly different route where they kind of mixed this kind of concept with Dungeons and Dragons type thing, which were very popular at the time, and we ended up with the fighting fantasy type books. I think Steve Livingston and another guy whose name eludes me, Ian something, were behind those, and they became massive. They kind of mixed this concept with role-playing game concept where you could roll a dice to make things a little bit more random, and fighting fantasy and all its clones. I think there's several, though I can't remember the names, but the various. Steve Jackson, I think, was another writer of them. There were books on medieval type fantasy and Japanese fantasy and all sorts of things. They were big in the 80s, and a lot of them are still around. You can get reprints, or you can get the digital versions of them. Anyway, like I said, they're very popular, and these original Choose Your Own Adventure ones, I'm not sure they're quite as sophisticated as the later ones, but it's just a lot of fun, and I thought it'd be very simple to convert them to some sort of activity online, but maybe I won't even get around to doing that. So anyway, that is the Origin for Choose Your Own Adventure book box set. Okay, next up, lastly for this month, this book. I heard the author playing a role in part of the You're Dead to Me podcast recently, and she's an expert in this type of thing, the Mesopotamia. So this is Between Two Rivers by Mahdi al-Rashid, and it's a bit of ancient history for you. It's about the Mesopotamia region, I can't even say that properly, which is the area between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, and what is now Iraq. Yes, we're talking about Iraq again. And several civilizations rose and fell there in ancient history. And this kind of looks back, it gives you kind of like a vignettes of life in those days, based around certain objects that we have that have survived to this day. And so, like, we can go through, we've got the clay drum, the brick of Amar Suin, the statue of King Shogi, the boundary stone, the mace head. So she talks about a certain object, and then we get the story behind it, well, as far as we can know from this far removed from the actual events. And the civilization, the rulers, the people, what the average people were doing, and all sorts of things like that. And at the back we even have a timeline of Mesopotamian history, all the way from 3,500 BC, all the way up to 539 BC. So anyway, this type of thing is always interests me to some extent. I don't get massively heavy into it, but it's captivating to know how different and how the same these ancient peoples were. And this is a new book that's well reviewed. The shiny cover is looking nice on camera, and I got this one from Scorpio Bookshop too. I think I ordered it online and then went and collected it in person to save a few dollars on delivery fees. I only live about 15 minutes down the road from them. So yeah, so that is Between Two Rivers, Ancient Mesopotamia and the Birth of History by Mahdi al-Rashid. Look how nice and shiny that one is. Okay, I think that's the lot for this month. A nice crop there. And who knows when I'll actually get around to reading any of them, because I am currently reading several books. I am reading that Psychonauts one, so that's one. I am reading The Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester, which is a surprisingly modern feeling science fiction book written in 1956. I'm also working my way slowly through Orwell, The Life, the biography of George Orwell, or Eric Blair, by D.J. Taylor, I believe it is. That is keeping me busy on the book front, and I think that's pretty much all I'm going to be saying here today. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It's been a long one, 20 minutes just ticked over. So we'll catch you next time with hopefully a review of another book. See ya.